Your life hinges upon whether you are alcohol free or not. Alcohol is destroying you. Despite 1,000 attempts of telling myself I wasn't going to drink, I still drank that night. How much time do we have left? You know you want to quit drinking. You're afraid and anxious of what it's going to be like. If you continue to drink alcohol, your life is going to continue in a direction that you don't want. It affects everything. If you're alcohol free, everything in your life is going to get better. I would just keep drinking until I was hammered, 8 and 15 drinks. I'm going to die by like 32 in a hospital deathbed, thinking about the pain and the regret, not having fulfilled the potential that deep down in my heart and soul, I knew I was capable of. If you don't have your sobriety, you don't have anything.
Carry the hurt when it gets too hard. Pick it up, dust it off, and I fall down and living like
You had a pretty traumatic experience when you were 14 with your father passing from alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like alcohol goes back pretty much to like the very beginning. I grew up in like a really crazy dysfunctional family. Mom had like high anxiety, kind of OCD that I didn't really discover until later on. Both of my sisters, I have two older sisters, both of them struggled at some point. One of them was definitely an alcoholic, but got sober around 25 or so. And the oldest one, unfortunately, still struggles with heavy addiction, like heavy drugs, meth, all that stuff. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, super wild, kind of chaotic environment. And I think a lot of it was rooted in my dad's alcoholism. And so, yeah, pretty much experienced like all types of trauma from, fights and arguments and what felt like kind of like emotional neglect growing up to moving all the time, going to different schools. Like it was just wild. Cops coming to the house 2-3 days a week because my dad would be raging in the middle of the night. And then yeah, around 14, right before that, my family like split up, and I was living with a friend at the time, and I got a call from my sister, and she sounded like she was kind of crying and like really shaky, and she's like, "Hey, like you need to come meet here and like right now." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I had no idea. And when I got there, I'd gotten to my oldest sister. She had gotten an apartment, and my mom was living there at the time. And yeah, I walked up to the door, and like right at the same time, my sister and her ex-boyfriend showed up. And I was like, "What's going on?" And she was like, she couldn't say it. And then her ex-boyfriend was like, "Your dad died." And yeah, it was just like a soul-crushing moment, to hear that. There was a part of me that kind of knew it was coming because I had seen my dad's drinking get progressively worse, especially during that time where like the family split up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was wild.
Oh my gosh. Were you drinking? Did you start drinking at a young age?
Yeah, so I think I had my the very first time I drank, I was around probably 13, I think. Me and my best friends at the time, we went to their grandma's house, and we were like house sitting for her, and we went with their dad, and we were just like hanging out, playing music, messing around, and she had a bar. The grandma had a bar, and we had never drinking before, and it was me and a couple buddies, and we're like, shit, like, should we try it? Should we see what's all this alcohol stuff is about? And so she had like 20, 30 different types of like liquors, and we didn't know what we were doing. And so we just pulled them all out, and we started trying every one. And that night at 13 years old, we each probably had like 13 to 15 shots and just
Oh boy.
absolutely hammered. And we had music. We had this one song, we had it blasting like on repeat. And we were just like going crazy in the house. Woke up in the morning, like threw up that night, woke up in the morning, couldn't find one of the guys. Like we searched the house for like 20 minutes, and he happened to be like under the blankets, under the covers, like under the bed or something like that. It was crazy. And I had the smell of tequila in my nose for like 2 or 3 weeks. It was like,
Oh.
yeah, we binged that night. And yeah, I didn't drink really much at all after that until I think around sophomore year. Sophomore year, inevitably started partying in high school. And from that moment, I mean, I don't remember the first time in high school, but I do remember that I was always the binge drinker type. I could never just have one. Every time I would have one, a switch would go off in my brain, and I would just keep drinking until I was hammered. It was usually between like 8 and 15 drinks. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much when the cycle started, and I was pretty much trapped in that cycle for 15 years until I was 29.
And
Um,
you were consuming 4 to 6 bottles of wine daily?
I would say for that 15 years, I was a heavy, heavy, like functioning alcoholic binge drinker, like kind of a lot of people are, right? As they go through
Yeah.
high school and college, partying on the weekends. I always kind of did enough to get by and made sure my responsibilities were taken care of. Even through my 20s, I was like pretty entrepreneurial. And on the outside, it looked like I had everything figured out and that I just loved to party. But inside, it was like absolutely destroying me. Um, and I think a big part of the story is right when my dad died when I was 14, my uncle came down to like pay and help for the funeral, help with the funeral, and he gave me this book by Wayne Dyer, and it was called "You'll See It When You Believe It," and it's like a personal
Oh.
development book. And that was the first personal development book that I'd ever read at 14 years old at this like really crucial, pivotal period in my life. And it totally shifted my paradigm and introduced me to the concept of consciousness and how your beliefs influence your reality and all these different things, which I'd never even thought about or considered before at that age. And so it sent me down this rabbit hole of becoming like obsessed with like spirituality and consciousness and philosophy and growth and success and all these different things. And so right as my dad died and right around that time I started drinking, my personality was like split in two. Half of me was like obsessed with alcohol and obsessed with like the dopamine and the rush and the euphoria. The other half of me was really like oriented around personal growth and wanting to be successful. I had saw what alcohol had done to my family and I saw what drug addiction had, it just tore everything apart. It was the root of all chaos and misery. And so every time I drank, there was an incredible amount of like guilt and shame that came with it because I lost my dad to it and I saw myself going down the same path. And yeah, I started going to AA meetings when I was like 18, 19 years old. And it just never really clicked. It never resonated. And I knew there had to be more to the story. I never accepted the fact that I was diseased, mentally ill, broken, that I was born this way, that it's a defect, that I'm just genetically whatever, like that I had to live in the shadow of this thing forever. Um, and I tried quitting drinking like hundreds of times, and it just like never worked. I get a week, a few days, couple weeks. The longest I went was 6 months, but inevitably always found myself going back. Fast forward to COVID, right? The world is in like disarray, and
Mhm.
I had a little bit of money saved at the time, and so I went from drinking like a few days a week to drinking every day, and really rapidly. Once I started drinking every day, like my tolerance went up, the volume rapidly increased, and I got up to drinking 4 to 6 bottles of wine a day, which is like 20 to 30 drinks a day. And I was doing that for about 6 months before I kind of hit rock bottom and had a real moment of clarity where everything began to change.
So obviously everybody's rock bottom is different and we all know this. Well, I mean, people like me and you know this. Um, but what explain to me your rock bottom moment.
Yeah. So for that 6 months, the amount of alcohol I was drinking was like ungodly. I gained like 30 pounds. It was just fucked up. Like I would start drinking at, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., right when I woke up. Um, it was brutal. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It was terrible. And so I knew that like things were just declining. I could feel it. I was like, this track that I'm on is like really bad. Because we know anybody who has alcohol use disorder, alcoholism, it's like you can't really rewind the tape. It's like once you cross that invisible line from like controlled moderate use into like alcohol use disorder, alcoholism, a really problematic relationship with alcohol, what keeps people on the alcohol merry-go-round for decades of their life is trying to moderate, trying to figure out a way to just manage it, right? Because they're in denial and alcohol is serving a positive purpose for them in some way, albeit it's really short term, but causing
Mhm.
really bad detriment in the long term in all these other ways. Um, and so like yeah, so everything was, like, declining, and one day, a buddy of mine invited me to the pool, and I had been drinking all day, and we get to the pool, we're hanging out, having drinks, and he challenges me to a swimming race, and I'd never lost a swimming race in my life. Like, I've grown up always super athletic, faster than everyone, stronger than everyone, like, I've never lost a swimming race. I'm, like, an extremely fast swimmer. And he was, like, really egging me on. He's like, "Dude, I've never lost either, like, I'll definitely beat you," and, my ego got in the way, and I was like I didn't wanna race him because 1, I knew I'd win, but I just, like, wasn't in the mood to race. And he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I was like, "Alright, fine, we'll race." So, we get on the edge of the pool, and we start swimming, we start racing, and I'm swimming, like, as fast and as aggressively as I can, and I'm ahead of him. And around like 60 or 70% of the way, like, through the pool, my left shoulder, like, rips out of its socket and
Oh.
is, like, backwards, like, mangled, like, hanging, like, upside down in some weird fucked up position. And it was the most, like, excruciating pain of my life. I had never been in that much physical pain before, and the reason it ripped is, 1, my body was just, like, not, like, in an environment to be really strong. I'd been drinking, like, gallons of alcohol over the last few months, right? And so my
Yeah.
body was just, like, weak, and yeah, it ripped out, and immediately I stopped, and, like, I get out of the pool, and I'm, like, screaming and, like, fucking cussing and, like, just in this excruciating pain, and I couldn't, like, get up out of the water because, like, the buoyancy of being, like, to my neck was somehow, like, more comfortable. As soon as the gravity hit it, like,
Oh,
pain just, like, shot up. And
yeah.
so, like, I'm sitting there in the pool in this ridiculously excruciating pain, and I'm like, What do I do here?" My shoulder is out. Like, do we call an ambulance? Like, I don't have insurance. Like, do I what the fuck do I do, you know? Um, and it was just, like, this moment of insane pain and confusion and, like, just yeah, so I figured, like, "Okay, I gotta try to figure out how to get my shoulder back in." So I'm just, like, sitting there under the water, like, wiggling it, trying to move, like, trying to figure out what a shoulder's supposed to feel like, and it
Oh,
felt like it was out for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And by the grace of God, I found a way to, like, it, like, slip back in. And, and yeah, I slipped it back in, and I end up and so, like, during that moment, right, like, while I'm in pain, I'm like, clarity is sort of setting in. And what I and I talk about this all the time in my podcast. It's like, one one thing that I did that was incredibly important that I feel like we all have to do if we want to finally, like, wake up, is we have to connect alcohol to pain, right?
oh, yeah.
As we look at, like, how the brain works, right? Like, the prime directive of the brain, which is to pursue pleasure and to avoid pain, right? And we look at how alcohol works neurochemically and what it does to our system. When we drink alcohol, it raises our baseline level of dopamine. So we normally sit at about 50 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine in our brain. For context, when we have sex or we eat our favorite food, for example, it'll raise baseline level from 50 to, let's say, 90 to 100. So it effectively doubles your baseline level of dopamine. And that's what life naturally affords us: food, good times, sex, right? Anything above 100 is totally unnatural. We're not really meant to experience it. Alcohol takes your brain to around 200 nanograms 200 nanograms per deciliter. And so, because that's what happens, the brain records that and says alcohol equals pleasure, alcohol
Yeah.
equals reward, alcohol equals stress relief, or whatever it is that we're experiencing. So, alcoholics or people of alcohol use disorder have this program as a result of what alcohol does to us, that alcohol equals pleasure. And it's just this program that runs right in the back of your mind. So, in that moment, I connected alcohol to pain. I looked at this pain that I was feeling, and I was like, I would not have experienced this if it wasn't for alcohol. And so it's like I reprinted my relationship to alcohol and the meaning that alcohol had. The next thing I did is I played the tape forward, which I'm sure you're familiar
Yes.
with. And I've got a famous podcast episode where I go super, super deep into it. And I played the tape forward in two scenarios. I kind of saw it in my mind. There's two paths in front of me. I'm 29 years old. I'm about to turn 30 in a few months. And number one, I'm nowhere near the person that I would be at 30 years old, right? When we're all kids, teenagers, we have this idea and this conception of who we're going to be at 30, right? Where we're going to be in life, what life is going to look like, what our career, how much money we're going to be making, etc. And I was like, dude, I'm a fucking universe and a half away from the standard I have in my mind of the man that I know I'm capable of being. And as I was honest with myself in that moment, it was like, dude, it's the alcohol. It's the alcohol. Like, look at how you've been living. Look at the last 10 years of your life, how you've never truly been able to break through to the next level in all these different business ventures and all these different things that you've tried. It's like, dude, you're on this fucking hamster wheel. Like, alcohol's destroying you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'm at 4 to 6 bottles of wine a day. If I take another drink and play the tape forward there, like, dude, I'm going to die by like 32, 33, 34. And I fast forwarded to being like in a hospital deathbed, probably underweight, feeling like death, like hooked up to machines, and thinking about the pain and the regret that I would feel dying in a hospital bed at 32, 33 years old, not having fulfilled the potential that deep down in my heart and soul, I knew I was capable of. Because outside of alcohol, I knew I was a stud. I knew that if I didn't have alcohol in my life, like, I could figure it out. I could be a really good person. I could make and create the type of life that I wanted for myself. But part of the reason I never got there was the dysfunction, the pain, the lack of confidence, the insecurity, all the parts of myself that I later had to have the courage to meet and work with and develop, right?
Yeah.
And so it just became really clear to me. And when I played the tape forward in that regard, the pain that I felt, like the regret, I felt that so viscerally. And it was like another imprint. I was like, I will do anything to not have to feel that, to not have to feel like I'm going to die without having fulfilled my potential. Like, that was incredibly scary to me. And
That
then,
is amazing. I'm sorry. I just wish more people would like have the same mindset.
yeah. And I attribute that to like the 15 years of work that I'd done on myself, reading hundreds of books and listening to all the podcasts and like getting super deep into spirituality and philosophy and all these things, and like the Stoic philosophy of memento mori. Like, I'd always be reflecting on my mortality and things like that. So like, I'd built a map to be able to access that, whereas a lot of people haven't. A lot of people haven't dug into spirituality and philosophy and gone super deep into personal growth. And so that's not just like a part of their day-to-day map, but I was able to access it in that moment, thankfully. And then on the other hand, I played the tape forward and I said, okay, if I eliminate alcohol from my life, like, what's possible? And I had eliminated alcohol, for months at a time or whatever. And like, dude, life got so much better, mental clarity, productivity, energy, commitment, and focus, my ability to stay consistent in different ways. And so I knew that, like, if I just eliminate this thing that's fucking ruining me, siphoning my soul, my energy, all that stuff, like, I'll figure it out. And so in that moment, I made what seemed like the ultimate sacrifice, the scariest, hardest decision of my life, which was to let go of this thing that I loved more than anybody that I knew, you know?
Your
And
bestest friend in the whole entire world.
yeah, it's been there. It's been there. It's supported me. It's helped me through all the times, right? As it
Right.
had for all of us when we were in relationship with it. And so, yeah, I made what seemed like the scariest decision of my life. In the moment, I thought I was going to be living a life of boredom, dullness, perpetually craving, perpetually missing out. I thought I was going to be judged. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to travel. I'm just turning 30. My life is just about to start. I'm probably going to have more money. I'm probably going to be able to experience all these new things. And now I have to do it without alcohol. And it was like, it felt scary, super daunting, terrifying. And so right at that time, like I quit drinking, and by the grace of God, by the grace of the universe, whatever, I was introduced to this coaching program. I actually was offered to become the marketing director of this coaching program. And so they were like, um, hey, so if you want to be the marketing director and know how to sell our program, you have to run through it like a client would. And I was like, okay. So I went through the course, I did the routines and the habits, and I was hopping on coaching calls every week. And that program, it kept me sober. And it not only kept me sober, but it radically transformed my life. I'd been studying mindset and personal development and all these different things, and I felt like I'd heard it all. Right. But when I went through that program, I learned things about myself while applying like a system that optimized mind, body, spirit, and neurochemistry. And it felt like all the books that I had read and the thousands of hours of podcasts I listened to and all the spiritual work and everything else, like just boom, all the dots started to connect. And eventually I became a coach within their system, and naturally got really, really good at, like, I was just naturally really good at helping and coaching people. I led retreats. And then after about 18 months of working with them, I got this really deep feeling in my gut that I needed a sense of autonomy and I wasn't growing in the way that I wanted to there. So, at that point, I was around 18 months or so alcohol free. I left the company, got on TikTok, and I saw a video about sobriety. And I'd never seen a video about sobriety before. And at that point, I had started posting like mindset videos, and they were getting 100 views, 200 views, 300 views, nothing crazy. And I saw this video about sobriety, and I went into the comments and I just saw pain. Prior to getting into sobriety coaching and running a program, I was a digital marketer for 8 years. And so my kind of my entrepreneurial marketer brain, just kicked in. I was like, look at all these people in pain. All the comments were like, I'm on day 1, I'm on day 5, I just relapsed. How did you do it? How did you do it? How do you handle cravings? And I was like, like, I just figured out a way to get sober. That wasn't AA. That wasn't all the traditional rhetoric and models. Let me post a video about my sobriety journey to see what'll happen.
Yeah.
And so I recorded this really, really silly video. I was like laying at the pool, and I was like laying on one of those like pool beds or whatever. And I held the camera right here where my waist is. You could like see my feet in the pool in front of me. And it was a really short 6-second video that was like 5 ways my life got better since I quit drinking. Text, 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 text with like some corny music in the background. Like, all right, let's see what happens. Almost didn't post it. I was like, this is stupid. Posted it. Within an hour, it got 5,000 views. By the end of the day, it had 50,000 views. And I was like, holy shit. I had never gotten that type of engagement before. And I just left that company and I was ready to kind of do something on my own. So I was like, let me just follow the views. So I posted another video about sobriety and another video about sobriety. 20,000 views, 50,000 views, 100,000 views, 250,000 views. And the 12th video that I posted went viral, got over 1 million views. And people were just really connecting with and engaging with the way that I was talking about sobriety. And everything started to kind of shift and change from there. I was responding to every comment and creating content, and within a couple months, I was jumping on phone calls with people, just like talking to them, not even offering a program or help. And then one day somebody was like, hey man, I really resonate with everything that you say. I really connect with you. Like, can you hold me accountable? Can you work with me and show me the way that you did it? Took on my first client, and Stop Drinking Coach was kind of born from there. And started my podcast 8 months later. And it's been an incredibly wild and amazing journey.
It's obviously my audience, well, a lot of my audience knows mine is very similar. I just threw a drinking video out there, like quitting drinking, and I was like, oh, this is stupid. Like, scary to even do. And then it took, I think, 2 weeks for it, and all of a sudden it just like took off. I think it ended at like right under 300,000, but on YouTube, that's pretty good
really
for
good.
a person that only has 100 subscribers at the time. And
Yeah.
so I ran with it. I was like, wow, I think I finally found my calling. Like, like I've been into fitness my whole entire life. And then that just wasn't, I was losing my passion for that. And so I did that video and I was like, holy crap. And then the messages that you get, like you're changing people's lives, you're like, they resonate with you. And it just like makes you keep going. It keeps you sober. And I mean, like, everybody's like, "How'd you get sober?" I'm like, "Well, 1, I did 75 hard, and 2, my community." Like, I built an online community, like my own AA group.
Yeah.
It's just funny how that works, and, I love tried starting a TikTok, and I'm still, like, messing with it. I think one of mine well, I deleted the app, but I still have the studio, so I can't really mess with it too much, but I think one of mine got, I don't know, it's over 500,000, I know that. But I was like, "Holy crap, that's exciting."
Yeah.
It's so exciting. Um,
That's awesome.
so pretty much you dislocating your shoulder was your, like, pivotal moment of, "I need to quit drinking?"
Yeah. Yeah. The pain was so insane that like, yeah, it created a moment of clarity for me. I was like, right, what is rock bottom? Like rock bottom is an experience they say that is so painful that you look at it and you say to yourself, like, listen, I'm willing to do whatever the fuck I have to do to not have to go back here. Right?
Yeah.
It's a pain that is so insanely, like, visceral or whatever. Like, some people it could be within their marriage or their relationship, or maybe some people end up on the street, or some people like, whatever it is. But it's an experience that's like, this is so fucked up that I'm willing to open myself up to any other level of discomfort or pain that I have to go through and manage to not do this. And that was it for me. I was like, this pain that I'm feeling right now, all these different ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, I will do anything to not re-experience it again, you know?
So, um, how long after, like, was it immediately after that? Or, like, you said once you did that coaching program?
Yeah, yeah. So I quit in that moment and I stayed sober um for like 30 days or something on my own. And then I think I was introduced to that program. And that program was so helpful too because I saw that like one there it just seemed like such an amazing opportunity. Like I was surrounded by some really amazing people who were like ahead of the game and doing a lot of big things in life. And I knew that if I went back to drinking, I would destroy that opportunity, right? And then at the same time, they were like, "Well, you gotta run through it. You gotta become a client or work through it in that regard." And then the things that I did in that program just changed my life.
Yeah. Is there, have you faced any challenges since you got sober?
Um, yeah, I mean, the sobriety journey itself, I would say the first year was really challenging.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had I had cravings on and off for about a year. Fridays and the weekends were the toughest for me. Um, and but I was like a really, really deep case. Not everybody has perpetual cravings after they quit. I think it's just totally depend on the person, their neurochemistry, how long they were drinking, all that stuff, their environments. But for me, I'd conditioned myself like an absolute dog, to be craving alcohol. And my cravings were like really physical and visceral intense. Like some people just get like
Really?
mental urges and cravings. For me, it's like my entire system like locks up. Um, but
How'd you
yeah,
get through those?
the first year, one, it was following the system. So like the intensity and duration of the cravings were a lot less than they would have been if I wasn't following the system. And how I got through them was in on the weekends, I just found every possible which way to keep myself distracted. So like on a Friday night, I would make sure I had somebody to like hang out with, or I would play video games. Like I played a lot Call of Duty and stuff like that. That was like a really good way because gaming in a way also like bumps up dopamine. I think something important for people to realize when you're going to quit drinking and you have cravings for alcohol is that you're not actually craving alcohol itself. What your body and your brain and your nervous system, your neurochemistry actually wants is the rise in dopamine and the rise in GABA, right?
Mhm.
The neurochemistry of alcohol is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but is incredibly important and such an essential part of understanding alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, a problematic relationship with alcohol, and addiction in general. And that was kind of one of the missing pieces that once I discovered it, created light bulbs that was like, okay, I'm not mentally ill. I don't have a disease. I'm not broken. Despite 1,000 attempts of telling myself I wasn't going to drink, yet I still drank that night anyways. Like, it's not a moral failure, it's science, right?
Yeah.
And once you begin to understand the science and neurochemistry and how alcohol changes your brain and all these different things, it all starts to make sense and it creates this huge light of hope. Um, so yeah, understanding the neuroscience of it, keeping myself distracted, playing video games, always having a plan, right? Like as we know, like what is it? Free time or boredom, idle
Yeah.
hands is like the devil's playground or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So really just like taking a structured strategic approach and having support in terms of like community and accountability, right? Like few people spontaneously go from alcoholism or alcohol use disorder to just sobriety without systems, tools, structure, support, community, some level of accountability. So having that,
Yeah.
being connected to that coaching program, being around people whom I looked up to, didn't want to let down, and have that having that source of accountability was really helpful. I would say one of the hardest parts of sobriety the first year for me was when I moved from California to Austin and starting to like I started going on dates and I was in a brand new city. Nobody knew me. I had the opportunity to kind of recreate myself and dating and relationships in a way was a trigger as well. Because like
Yeah.
what do everybody like to do when they go on dates? It's like, oh, let's go have a
Happy
drink.
hour.
Yeah, right. And so like there was a period between like 7 and 9 months where I was like almost seriously considering drinking, right? Like Fridays or Saturdays if I was going to go on a date, I'd have to like sit there and like ground myself, do a little breath work and like really play the tape forward as I was really contemplating like, fuck, like if I have a drink tonight, it feels like it would go smoother, easier, less awkward, or like, all that stuff you kind of
Yeah.
struggle with in early sobriety before you really become confident just being present. And so dating I think was a real slippery slope and trigger. In traditional recovery they say you should avoid getting into relationships at least the first year, which I think is a good move because it can be really triggering for a lot of people, not only putting yourself in those environments, but let's say you do meet somebody when you're 3 or 4 5 6 7 8 months in, and maybe you really start to like that person and it doesn't work out or something happens, right? And at that point, you still haven't really dialed in your mental and emotional regulation, and you don't know how to interpret your sensations and manage what's going on. Um, yeah, it could just be a slippery slope for
I
falling into it.
They also say that, like, don't, like, break up a relationship also within the first year because your
Yeah.
emotions are so out of whack. I mean, I remember and my husband edits my videos, so, I mean, I've said this in many podcasts, but I remember it had to have been 'cause I quit July 10th, 2023, and I remember it had to have been August. And we were on our way back from the lake, and I was like, "I don't like you sober." Like, I was, like, dead set, like, "How do we do this? We don't know each other sober." And so, obviously, we've come a long ways from those moments, but, like, I think a lot of those, like, firsts in that first year are so, like you said, triggering, and, like, we just have to, like, be aware of, like, how to react to them, and so, like, I mean, you're gonna get pissed off and be like, "I'm leaving you," but then it's like, well, now what? Like, now you're
Yeah.
gonna, like, go drink yourself because, like, you don't know how to deal with your emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important for everybody to understand like the first year of sobriety is a really sensitive period where it's like it's really rediscovery process of like who you are in so many ways,
Mhm.
right? If you've
Yeah.
been drinking since you were in high school or in college and now you're an adult in your 30s, 40s, 50s, I've helped people in their 60s and 70s even who have been drinking their whole life. Like you don't know who you are, right? There's a lot of firsts, like you mentioned, when it comes to sobriety. There's your first social series of social events. There's your first vacation. There's your first maybe sober relationship. Like there's so many different things that you'll encounter that you'll have to learn how to manage. Um, I like to say like you don't quit drinking, you learn how to live alcohol free. And that's a learning process. And if you've lived for 15, 20, 30, 40 years drinking, you don't know how to live alcohol free. And
Right.
so that's why you might stumble or fall or relapse and things like that. And it's important to understand that it's a learning process, right? You're learning how to manage your mind. You're learning how to manage your emotions. You're learning how to manage your time. You're learning how to prioritize your time. You're learning how to build better systems in your life. Um, it's all a learning process. And so it's important to have that, I think, awareness and sort of level of compassion with yourself that if you find
Mhm.
that things are hard and you're finding resistance and you're catastrophizing those things and saying, fuck, this is my life forever and this is how it's always going to be. It's like, it's not. It's not. You
Right.
get better. You get better at it just like you get better at driving a car, playing an instrument or whatever.
I always tell people like that first year is the hardest. You learn so much about yourself. It's getting through all those firsts, and then the second year is like now you're working on the why. Like getting through all those emotions and figuring out like, oh, this is why I lacked emotional support as a child, or I have a very similar childhood to yours from what you were explaining in the very beginning. And so it is hard. Like, why are we the way we are? And why did we turn to alcohol for so many years? And
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, so like, I mean, I'll be 2 years in this summer, but like that first year was definitely like just getting through those firsts.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine breaking up my marriage or making any like huge calls of my life in that first year because you're like figuring out who you are. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really raw, sensitive period. And to remember, like, there's so much light at the end of the tunnel. The way I explain it to people is like, let's say you're 30 years old or 40. Let's say you're 40 years old. Okay. You've been drinking for, let's say, 20, 25 years, right? How much time do we have left? If you're 40, let's say we're going to live to 100 for the sake of math, right? You've got 60 years left. The way I see it is like if you've had a problematic relationship with alcohol for the last 20, 25 years, okay, and you want to quit drinking, but you're afraid and anxious of what it's going to be like and what it means and how you're going to feel, like the way I say it is like, are you willing? Do you have the courage to put your head down and make a commitment to changing up your lifestyle, working a program, getting some extra support and accountability, and really applying yourself in a new way for a year so that the next 39 years of your life can kind of be smooth sailing, right? When you think
right.
about it in like the greater context and grand scheme of life, it's like, can you do it for a year? The chances are, if you can stay sober for a year, your chances of staying alcohol free or like really like long term sobriety, I think shoot up like several 100%. But the reality is, when we look at addiction statistics, like very few people make it to a year.
Right.
I don't know what it is. AA is like 6%, right? I know there's a lot of better systems and strategies than AA these days. But there's multiple paths up the mountain. Not knocking AA. I have my own ideas and interpretations of it. But it's worked, and you can't.
It's
It's
not for everybody.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
I mean,
Uh,
just like community groups aren't for everybody. I mean,
yeah,
to each their own.
to
I
each their
wouldn't step foot into an AA, and I'm not saying that because I don't believe in it or not. I just like the thought of it terrifies me.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't resonate, right?
Right.
With a lot of people. But yeah, it's like that first year is so crucial, and it's like if you find a way to get sober, and you're working a program or working with a sobriety coach, or you find a way to string some time together on your own, protect and cherish your sobriety at all costs. Like
Yes.
I say this a lot in my content. It's like, and I was watching one of your YouTube videos. Your YouTube videos are freaking awesome, by the way.
Thank
Like
you.
the way that you edit them in the beginning, your intros, we got to talk about them after this.
I'll give
Um,
you my husband's information.
yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, he's really talented.
Yeah.
The way I say it is like, if you are an alcoholic or alcohol use disorder, problematic relationship with alcohol, whatever the label is here, um, your life hinges upon whether you are alcohol free or not. Like, it is the most important thing in your life, because we can go down two paths. If you continue to drink alcohol, we can guarantee with 100% certainty, airtight, that your life is going to continue to trend in a direction that you don't want. Your neurochemistry is going to continue to take you into a deeper and deeper hole. You're going to go into more of a deficit, making it harder down the line when you do decide to quit, right? Your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your energy, your clarity, your productivity, your presence, like everything is going to trend in the direction that you don't want if you keep drinking, right? It affects everything, your relationships, your work productivity, your earning capacity, like everything. On the other hand, if you're alcohol free, with that same level of certainty, airtight, 100%, you can guarantee that everything in your life is going to get better. Your mental health, your emotional health, physical health, clarity, relationships, productivity, work, career, impact, meaning, purpose, drive, earning potential, like everything's going to get better. So, based off of that, like if you have a problematic relationship with alcohol, your sobriety is the most important thing in your life, above your kids, above your work, above everything. Because if you don't have your sobriety, in theory, you don't have anything. And
Yeah.
maybe not immediately. You could say, oh, well, I could go back to drinking and I'll still have my kids and my relationship or whatever. But you can guarantee in time, those things you're going to start to lose.
Exactly. I just so long-term recovery, 50% of those with alcohol dependence achieve long-term sobriety. The relapse rate is 40 to 60% of people relapse, but after 5 years sober, the relapse rate drops below 15%.
Hmm, good
So like
statistic.
that first year is definitely the hardest year, and they say most people do relapse within that first year. And I wish people like I just what did I say to her the other night? I have this lady who is quitting drinking. She's a week sober, and she was like, "I haven't gone anywhere." Oh, I said, "I think until you're proud to say I'm not drinking is when you'll be 100% ready to go to the functions without wanting to drink." Because I've never known how to answer that. Like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I isolated for 2 to 3 months and didn't want to do anything. And I said, and then I got to think about it, I'm like, you have to be like confident and proud to say, I'm not drinking. There's something empowering when you go somewhere where everybody else is drinking and being like, I'm not drinking and leave it at that. Like, obviously, like navigating that wise. Like to me, I wear my emotions on my face. So like when people ask me why you don't drink, I'm like, well, do you want to see me wasted? Because it ain't it ain't pretty all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've thought about too, it's like, what do you tell people, right? That's like a common question people have when they're first getting sober. Um, and when I first started coaching, like I came up and I gave people like a list of 10 things you could say. It's like, oh, I'm doing a health kick. I'm working with a business coach for work, but they're telling me to not drink so I can reach my goals. Or like I'm on antibiotics, and like, I just like all these things because people get like nervous or uncomfortable
Yeah.
telling people flat out that they don't drink or that they quit. And so now I tell people is like, be absolutely 100% honest. And
Yeah.
like the script is, I'm not drinking right now. And when people ask why, it's like, dude, alcohol's been really making me feel like shit. Like the hangovers that I have are just incomprehensible. and I'm like, it affects my ability to really be present at home, like for my kids and my productivity at work. And it doesn't sit well with me. And then they're like, okay, well, when are you going to start drinking again? Or how long are you going to keep this up? And you just say, I don't know, but I'm just kind of taking it one day at a time. And right now it feels really good not to drink. So you enjoy your drink, and then change the conversation.
The more I learn about alcohol, like obviously I'm still, fairly early into my journey compared to, some of you that I talk to. But to me, it's like I'm just so blown away that it's such a toxin, and I personally did not realize how bad it actually was for me until I realized that I was drinking what I put in my car.
Yeah.
And I'm
Ethanol.
like, "Holy shit." Like, why is this even allowed? And then, like, the comments that I would get on, like, it belongs on a hardware shelf and all these things, and I'm like, it's the more research you do about alcohol, I think, like, when people ask you why you don't drink, it's like, now I just wanna be like, "Well, because I don't drink poison? I don't know."
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't need to give you an excuse of why I'm not drinking. Like, I in the very beginning, yeah, I'm awkward. I've had people be like, "Oh, are you sure this is a forever thing? You're really done drinking?" Well, in those beginning months, I don't know, was I sure? I'm not sure. I don't know. I did it for 75 days and then I decided like I never want to drink again. So, I'm sorry that you want to still drink, and then the whole like non-toxic thing, like I'm going to do no fluoride, no this, no that, like aluminum free this and like all these things. I'm like, "But you're still consuming alcohol."
Yeah. Right.
Like, it just blows my mind, and that's why, like, when people ask me that question, like, what is your response?" or "What did you do?" I'm like, "I don't know, I'm so far." To me, it's ages ago to that beginning phase to now I'm just like, tell them the truth and, like, I don't wanna deal with myself drunk anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to kind of answer it and go about it, but yeah, just being honest. Like, you don't want me to drink. If I drink, I'm gonna drink all the alcohol. Like, I'm not that,
Right?
I'm just gonna drink all of it, and I'm gonna become an asshole, and I'm gonna be selfish, and it's just gonna be about me and the alcohol. And like, I might say things or do things that are out of character and out of alignment once I'm 10, 12, 14, 16 drinks deep. And then I'm gonna wake up feeling like shit tomorrow, and
Yeah.
that's no fun, you know?
Exactly. We went to a concert. I had a podcast with a biker. They have a sober club, and we went to Jason Aldean together. And people would walk up to him, didn't even know him, and they were like, "Can I buy you a beer?" And he's like, "Buy me a beer, I'll be in jail." Like, it's just
Yeah,
so like I'm like, yes, I love the honesty of it. Like, it's
yeah,
so true because he's been like, it's between I think approaching 10 years sober, but oh my gosh, like it's the honesty that comes with it is I think the more it's our power.
totally. Yeah, and it's like a major part of our mental, emotional, spiritual development and maturity,
Yeah.
is that self-honesty, which people who have a problematic relationship with alcohol struggle with. And it's like not a fault of their own, it's just where their consciousness is at on their like human development journey, right? Like, when we just look at the raw truth of what alcohol is and what it serves collectively in our society, right? Alcohol is a coping strategy. And like, we're either doing it consciously or unconsciously. And regardless of how you drink or how it's showing up for you, you're still using it to cope at some level, right? Some people are obviously using it to cope for social awkwardness and right? Social anxiety. Some people are obviously using it to cope because they lack meaning and direction and purpose in their life and they hate their job. Some people are obviously using it to cope for grief and sadness and pain and disconnection in their relationship. Some people are obviously using it to cope because of some tragedy they just experienced, right? Other people, like, so you've got the 10% they say has alcohol use disorder, which I think it's like probably closer to 25 to 30%, but that's just me. Then you've got like kind of the vast majority middle who are like somewhat relatively consistent drinkers, whether they're weekend warriors, they're having drinks on it somewhat, they're like in a contract and relationship with alcohol, but kind of deny it and don't really know it. They're still using it to cope, right? Like, oh, but Bardia, I'm just using it. I just like to kick back on the weekends. I just like to go to the bar to socialize with friends. I just like to let off some steam after a long work week. It's like, okay, well, you're using it for stress. You're using
Right.
it for overwhelm. You're using it to maybe lubricate the conversation with these people whom otherwise, without alcohol, you have relationships in your life that aren't actually really fulfilling you and like supportive, where you guys can't just connect and talk about life and what you're up to and support each other's growth process without alcohol. You have to drink so that you could find a way to access that within yourself, right? So at the end of the day, it's like one way or another, alcohol is a coping strategy. And a tremendously large population of people who drink are in denial around that because they're getting value from it in the short term, and they just either haven't drinking enough or develop the insight to make the connection around the downstream consequences. And like, they're like, okay, it's still working for me. Like, yeah, I get hungover. Yeah, I kind of feel like shit from time to time. Yeah, from time to time, I say or do things that I have to apologize for, like feel a little shame or
Oh,
guilt over. But I'm not willing to give up the party, and I'm not willing to give up going to the bar, and I'm not willing to, give up the football games or whatever, because I feel like I'm still getting value and benefit from it.
I I just talked about this on a different podcast, but I feel like when you tell people that you don't drink or they know that you don't drink, they always justify their drinking and why they still drink, or I don't really drink
Yes.
that much.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've had very specific moments to where like even when I was drinking and I was drinking with a group of people, um now that I'm not drinking, they're like, "Well, we didn't drink like you," or "I didn't drink like you," or "I didn't have the problem like you." I'm like, "But you're still drinking." Like, I quit drinking. Obviously, who has the problem? You're denying your relationship with alcohol and
Yeah.
justifying why you still drink. And, like, I feel like so many people I've been talking to lately are like, "Oh, when people justify why they still drink," or I mean, it's just the denial phase of why they can't let go of alcohol, but yet Megan, the one that was the drinker that had the problem, quit drinking.
Yeah, it's like they're protecting it because they feel like they're still getting value and benefit from it. And like maybe they are, right? Every adult is fully autonomous to make that decision. Like,
Yeah.
is going out and drinking on the weekends and doing the party thing, the weekend warrior thing, is that like based off of my life architecture, where I'm at, how happy I am, what my level of connection, meaning, and purpose is in life, the job that I work, how much money I make, the track that I'm on in my life, right? My future, my goals, considering the context of that, like, is going out on the weekends and doing that thing or having drinks every night after work, like, is that serving me, right? Or is it not, right? And the thing is like, it all depends on the person, right? If you're really comfortable in your life, in the way things are, if you feel comfortable with the track that you're on, hey, I like this job. I like the amount of meaning, purpose, and connection that I have in my life. I enjoy um, the progress and the speed of progress I'm making towards my goals, whatever those are. And I'm going out and doing that in the evenings or whatever, and I'm willing to deal with the repercussions of hangovers and brain fog and feeling like shit and spending the extra money and the conversation, like whatever. I'm like, cool, you can do that. But just know that like you're walking a fine line and a slippery slope. You're kind of playing Russian roulette, and you don't know when the time is going to be where you go from what seems like this happy go lucky, controlled party, nonchalant, it's cool, no big deal, to where one day, like, you just step over a line and now you're kind of in the grips of alcohol use disorder. And now you're looking forward to it. And now you're starting to have cravings and urges around it. And like really slowly under your nose, like you start digging a little deeper and deeper into it. you know? Like, I've got people who come into my program who, like, in their teens and high school and 30s, like,
Oh,
no issue. But then at 40, 45, 50, they start to develop a problematic relationship, right? It's just like you never know.
exactly. How do you, sorry, what's your answer when people are like, well, why can't you just moderate? Like, I get that one a lot.
Yeah. So for um so this goes into like the neurochemistry. So my theory is this is that when there's people who can moderate, like just have 1, 2, or 3 and then stop, versus people like me or maybe like you who can't moderate, where once I have 1 or 2, it's like a switch goes off and it's done. I can't stop. It's because the way that I feel on alcohol and what alcohol does to me and my neurochemistry is different than what it does to you. When I drink alcohol, alcohol acts more like cocaine. I get a really intense rush of pleasure and euphoria. That's like this huge spike, like boom, it goes up
Yeah.
and then it drops rapidly. And that drop is what creates like the compulsion and the anxiety at all costs to seek out more alcohol at the expense of whatever. People telling me stop, your partner being pissed off at you, whatever it is, like getting in your car and driving to get more alcohol when you're already hammered. You don't experience that. When you drink alcohol, you probably get a more mild buzz. You probably feel a little bit more like less in control. And when the alcohol starts to wear off after a couple of drinks, it's probably rather than it being this steep cliff, it's like a slow kind of downturn.
Yeah.
So therefore, in your mind, in your body, you're having a wildly different experience that I am. Just like people have wildly different experiences when it comes to smoking weed. Some people get really creative and introspective, and some people get massive paranoia and anxiety, right? Like you.
Right. Okay.
So why is it that when we look at weed, we're like, oh yeah, like weed just doesn't work that for that person. They get really reclused and they get like really anxious and paranoid. While some people, who are like stoners or whatever, smoke every day, and they're like, oh dude, it relaxes me, it quiets my mind. I'm like super chilling. It's like, okay, well, we can see that different agents, different chemicals interact with people's chemistry differently. And so I think people who have alcohol use disorder or alcoholism, they're experiencing alcohol much different than you. And it's not for people on that spectrum, it's not really a matter of just like willpower. If it was, it would be, right? We wouldn't have addiction. This
Right.
world of addiction wouldn't exist. It would just be a light switch. We would have complete control over cocaine and heroin and meth and everything else, and it would just be we turn it on and off. But it's not like that. And it's because we feel differently, right? That's just the
Yeah.
way it is. Our brain interacts differently with alcohol. And what's really important to understand, especially for people who have a problematic relationship with alcohol, people who are trying to get sober, is that no amount of time in sobriety fixes your problematic relationship with alcohol. No amount of time in sobriety heals or changes the way that alcohol interacts with you. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up when they're trying to get sober because they don't really understand the mechanics of recovery and your brain and how these things work. What most people do is they look at their relationship with alcohol and they say, okay, it's super problematic. I'm drinking all the time. I got to stop. And then they go a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. And they're like, look, life has gotten so much better. I've stopped drinking. Most of my problems have gone away. I didn't have a problem because look, I stopped drinking. So I could now just have one and things are going to be different. Look, I've had self control for 2 years. Therefore, if I have another drink, they apply that same self control. But that's that's a faulty program. That's an error in the way that you're assessing this data. The way that every addict or problematic user needs to look at it is not at the time they've had away from alcohol, whether it's a day, a year, or 10 years. What they need to do is say, what was my relationship with alcohol while I was drinking before that? Oh, well, it was fucked up. I was drinking too much.
Right.
I couldn't manage it. I couldn't, whatever. That's your criteria where you make your decision and assessment. Therefore, it doesn't matter if I've been sober for 10 years. If I pick up another drink, I'm going to pick up where I left off. It doesn't matter how much I've been meditating. It doesn't matter how much I've improved my mental and emotional regulation. It doesn't matter how much psychotherapy I've done, how much ayahuasca or plant medicine or mushrooms or psychedelic assisted therapy. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the way that alcohol interacts with your neurochemistry is just different. And that's like, quote unquote, the hard pill to swallow, right?
Yeah.
That's
I
like
feel like
what it is.
I I have a lot of experience with family that like has quit drinking and then they decide just like to have another drink and then it takes them right back down the same cycle. And it's like you're repeating the same cycle over and over and over. And like like I have always been just terrified to even take a sip of alcohol. Like and not even I don't even want to taste anybody's drink because like for the simple fact that yeah, like playing that tape forward, like constantly knowing like I don't want to be a shithead again and destroy my life because I feel like it would take me back down if not even like to a worse place.
Yeah. Yeah. And pain is a really good motivator. I would say pain is actually a better motivator than pleasure. A lot of people are like, you know, it's like when it comes to quitting drinking, like, what should I focus on? Should it be around like moving away from the destructive life that I was living? Or should it be around like pursuing some new amazing life and goals? And it's like kind of both. But what's actually going to motivate you more is moving away from that pain. Right. So like a simple example is like, I said this in one of my earliest podcasts is like, what would be a greater motivator for you to say you have to stay sober for a year? And you take two groups of people. It's like, one, if you stay sober for a year, you win $1 million. The other group that says you have to stay sober for a year, but if you don't, I'm going to chop your left arm off with an axe and you're just going to have to feel what that is. Like, you can't go to the hospital. It's like, you best believe that more people than not are going to be more motivated to stay sober to avoid the pain of getting their arm chopped off than just winning $1 million, even though that could help a lot of people. Right.
Yeah.
It's like burning your hand on a stove. Once you burn your hand on a stove, you now look at that stove with caution. And like, that's the way that you want to begin looking at alcohol on your sobriety journey is like, look at all the pain. I have people like do journaling exercises. Grab your journal and write out every fucked up thing that's ever happened as a result of drinking. The shame, the guilt, the pain, the things you said, the arguments, the relationships, the risks that you took, the things that could have happened, like the opportunities that were lost, the opportunity cost in every sense of the word. And like, look at that and integrate that and see that and feel that, because pain is a really, really good motivator. I mean, that's what rock bottom is in a way, right? Like, the defining moment that gets people to change is always pain. And it's important to understand that from like a physiological, biological view as like human beings, right? All this is tied to pain. Alcohol use is tied to pain. Addiction is tied to pain. And when we go through life, through a family, let's say, that was really painful and dysfunctional, and we go through a system of K through 12 that doesn't teach us anything about psychology or emotions and thoughts and mental and emotional regulation, right? Our natural biological instinct is to avoid pain. That's the prime directive of the brain, is to avoid pain and pursue pleasure, right? This is like Darwinian theory, right? Survival is all about avoidance of pain so that you can try to maximize survival. But the problem is that the pain that we experience And the pain in our life is actually a teacher.
Yeah.
In fact, the pain that we experience is actually ultimately like our greatest asset, right? I believe that like before we come to earth, we have like a curriculum, and we come to earth and we incarnate to learn lessons and to grow mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to mature. And the pain that we experience in our life is there to teach us how to evolve, how to grow, how to become better, how to become more resilient, how to become wiser, how to learn things so that we don't keep making the same errors in judgment and don't keep making the same mistakes over and over again, right? To harness that pain, to alchemize that pain, and to turn it into our wisdom, into our power. And when we look at how all this stuff is tied together, right? The reason we're drinking, the fear, the anxiety, the social awkwardness, like whatever it is, the grief, all those are just a mirror. They're parts of ourselves to not deny, to not numb out, to not reject, to not push away because you are fearful of them. You're fearful of feeling the sensation or confronting what feels like a truth, but to actually dive into them and to understand them and to process them, to reprocess them, to reprocess the story around them, to reprocess the meaning around them, and to integrate them as part of who you are so that you can then go out and use that as a source of wisdom so you can become better, so you can be more authentic, so that you can share that with other people to help them, to motivate them, to inspire them, right? Within your circle or broader beyond that. And so really understanding that like if you struggle with alcohol, whatever's beneath it that you're afraid of confronting, I know it seems scary, but once you begin to do it, the way that you grow, evolve, and mature is life-changing, right? That is precisely the mental, emotional, and spiritual journey that we're on as human beings, right? The way that organisms adapt is through pain, right? When we look at evolution, how does a tiger, an animal, a monkey, a dog, anything that we see in nature, a tree, a plant, how does it become bigger? How does it become stronger? How does it become faster? How does it become more resilient? It does it by going face to face with its predators or with it, as prey, and finding a way to escape it. The only way that genetically something adapts and becomes bigger, stronger, more resilient is by going face to face with pain on a regular basis so that it can unlock what's inside it so that it can expand and become bigger and more of itself, more of its potential, right? And a really simple way to explain this is like going to the gym, right? You look at somebody who's skinny and unfit, then they go to the gym every day and they force and expose themselves to pain, which is the repetitions of bicep curling, heavy weight,
Oh.
where your arm burns and you get lactic acid and you're tired and you feel like you're failing at rep 10, but you find another way to push through and you get a spotter to help you for 2 or 3 more reps. Like that's painful. But guess what comes from that? Bigger, stronger, more resilient, more muscles that have more endurance. And our mental operating system and our emotional operating system and our spiritual operating system is the same way. So when we look at alcohol, when we look at addiction, and when we look at this from like a 10,000 foot view in our society across 8 billion humans through our collective consciousness, we can just see that a problematic relationship with alcohol, alcohol use disorder, or addiction is really just a rung on the mental, emotional, and spiritual maturity process.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, there's all these ways you can look at it. It's like, oh, dude, I'm just having a beer. Cool. Like, oh, I'm just watching the game, man. Get off my
Right.
case. And it's like, okay, fine. But if you were to explore more deeply and sit that person down and consider the context of their life, who are you? What do you want? What's important to you? How much time do you have left? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want people to say about you at your eulogy? What are some goals that you have? Do you feel like you have a sense of mission and purpose? What do you do for work every day? How much do you love your job? Do you feel like you're using your skills and gifts and talents in a way that's moving you forward to create the type of lifestyle that you eventually want for yourself or for your family? And like, if you consider all those questions in that context and then ask the person like, "Oh, but I'm just watching the game." Like, how does all that fit in? Like, where are we at here?
Right.
Right? And so I think a big piece of this is like all of this calls for deeper self-reflection and self-examination.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. Like, holy crap. Um, so I don't want to take too much more of your time because I want to chat with you a little bit afterwards. But um thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I know
Like,
I just dropped some nukes there, but
no, yeah,
it was
but like it's
awesome.
like a lot of things that like we don't really like think about often. And like I love the pain. Like it's so true. But I mean, some people have to like I feel like hit rock bottom a few times maybe before that pain is too much. But
Yeah,
um
unfortunately. Yeah, we've all got, like, a different pain tolerance in that regard, right? Like, some people
yeah,
hit rock bottom and they keep digging, and it's like, yeah, it's the neurochemistry, and at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's like it's their spiritual curriculum in a way, you know?
yeah. I mean, I could go on and on and on about like so many people that I know that are struggling with drinking that I know and like the pain that they're causing their family themselves because of alcohol and it's like it's not enough pain though. Like when will it be enough pain? And I
Yeah.
guess that's the question people need to ask themselves is when will it be enough?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah, and
mean,
to really consider that, you know, it's like I have a lot of people who come in to the program who've, like, hit a rock bottom, but I also have a lot of people who don't, who
mhm,
haven't, and it's like I think that's great. You know, if you can find a way to get ahead of it, like why light your life on fire before you have to make a change, right? Like
exactly.
that's wisdom is being able to like play the tape forward and like see the chessboard of what's about to happen before it happens. You know, and some people have that and are blessed to find that in their human journey and other people aren't, unfortunately. And that's kind of the darker side of addiction that, you know, we we don't always consider, but is very real.